When a father-daughter road trip turns fatal for a mythical creature, their cover-up unleashes strange forces and even stranger consequences. That's the crux of Alex Schaffman's 2025 film Death of a Unicorn. A darkly comedic fantasy horror with a sharp cast, including Paul Rudd, Jenna Ortega, and Will Poulter. Schaffman, who both wrote and directed, has crafted a film that blends the absurd with the mysterious, exploring how an encounter with something fantastical spirals into chaos. This film stands out in 2025's crowded genre slate because it mixes horror's unsettling atmosphere with comedy's dry wit, all while threading a fantasy element rarely seen handled this way. Today, we are breaking down how Death of a Unicorn uses its premise and style to carve out a unique space in genre filmmaking. At its core, Death of a Unicorn follows a seemingly straightforward premise. A father and daughter accidentally kill a unicorn on their way to a weekend retreat. But this isn't just a family road trip gone wrong. The billionaire boss of the father sees this mythical creature as a key to miraculous cures, setting off a collision of greed, secrecy, and supernatural repercussions. The film's genre blend of horror, fantasy, and comedy positions it as a kind of genre hybrid that's both unsettling and darkly humorous. Released theatrically in 2025, it taps into current audience appetites for genre films that mix tones and challenge expectations, much like recent hits that blur comedy and horror. It's not a sequel or part of a franchise, so it carries the creative freedom to explore its unique tone without legacy baggage. Schaffman's direction here is confident and deliberate, balancing the film's tonal shifts with precision. Known for visually rich storytelling, he uses composition to create a sense of the uncanny, framing the natural world with eerie stillness before chaos erupts. The color palette leans into muted earth tones, punctuated by moments of surreal brightness, heightening the fantasy elements without losing the grounded feel of a family drama. Camera movement is purposeful, steady and contemplative during quieter scenes, then more kinetic and unsettling as tension builds. Editing rhythm supports this, with longer takes to build unease, contrasted by sharper cuts when the narrative's dark comedy kicks in. Schaffman's approach to pacing keeps the audience off balance, which fits perfectly with a story that constantly shifts between genres. The film's tension and drama hinge on how Schaffman handles the intersection of the mythical and the mundane. Rather than relying on spectacle alone, there's an intimacy to how the camera follows the father and daughter, emphasizing their emotional stakes. The horror elements aren't just in jump scares or gore, but in the creeping sense of something unnatural taking hold. Comedy arises organically from character reactions and the absurdity of the situation, never undercutting the darker moments, but instead providing relief and complexity. This tonal interplay is tricky to pull off, but Schaffman's direction gives it a textured feel, avoiding easy genre cliches. Paul Rudd leads with his trademark blend of everyman charm and deadpan humor, grounding the film's emotional core as the father caught in this bizarre mess. Jenna Ortega as the daughter brings a sharp, nuanced energy that complements Rudd's grounded performance, creating a believable family dynamic amidst surreal circumstances. Will Poulter's presence adds a layer of unpredictable intensity, likely playing a foil or catalyst in the unfolding chaos. The supporting cast, including Richard E. Grant and Téa Leoni, rounds out the ensemble with strong character, actors known for balancing comedy and drama. Together, the cast promises a chemistry that can navigate the film's tonal shifts, from heartfelt moments to darkly comic beats. Early impressions suggest the ensemble's dynamic is one of the film's key strengths. Given this cast and Schaffman's dual role as writer and director, the performances likely lean into subtlety over broad comedy or horror tropes. This isn't a film about heroes or villains in the traditional sense, but flawed people reacting to an extraordinary event. The chemistry between Rudd and Ortega in particular, anchors the emotional stakes, making the fantastical elements more impactful because they affect characters we care about. The ensemble's range supports the film's shift from dark comedy to horror, maintaining engagement without losing tonal cohesion. In early reviews and audience reactions, this mix of humor and pathos has been highlighted as a key factor in the film's appeal. Structurally, Death of a Unicorn appears to follow a narrative that gradually peels back layers of mystery and consequence stemming from the initial accident. The writing uses the fantasy element of the unicorn, not just as a plot device but as a thematic touchstone, exploring ideas around greed, exploitation, and the fragility of innocence. The weekend retreat setting gives the story a confined atmosphere that heightens tension and forces character confrontations. Themes of family, responsibility, and the clash between natural wonder and corporate ambition seem central. The screenplay balances a tight narrative drive with moments of surreal reflection, allowing the film to explore its darker comedic tones without sacrificing depth. The script's blending of genres supports a story that is part mystery, part character study, and part dark fantasy. The pacing likely builds suspense incrementally, with comedic relief punctuating moments of dread or revelation. Rather than relying on traditional horror jump scares or fantasy spectacle, the writing appears to emphasize psychological and emotional consequences. The film's themes also resonate with contemporary anxieties about nature's exploitation and the cost of unchecked ambition. This approach gives the story a grounded emotional core amidst its fantastic premise, inviting viewers to engage with both the humor and horror on a deeper level. Although Death of a Unicorn is a standalone film, it fits into a growing trend of genre mashups that combine elements of fantasy, horror, and dark comedy. Comparisons can be drawn to films like The Cabin in the Woods or The Witch, where supernatural elements serve as metaphors for human flaws and societal critiques. Unlike heist or thriller films, focused heavily on plot twists or spectacle, Sharfman's film prioritizes mood and character dynamics, aligning more closely with atmospheric horror comedies. Audiences familiar with genre-bending films will appreciate the way it defies simple categorization, offering a fresh take on familiar themes. The presence of a high-profile cast further elevates expectations for nuanced performances rather than pure spectacle. The film's mix of fantasy and horror with a comedic edge sets it apart from more conventional genre fare. It doesn't rely on typical blockbuster-style effects or high-concept action, but instead uses its premise as a springboard for exploring how ordinary people respond to extraordinary, even mystical, circumstances. 8. This positions it as a thoughtful, character-driven film with genre elements enhancing, rather than dominating the story. For viewers seeking a film that blends emotional complexity with genre thrills and laughs, Death of a Unicorn could be a refreshing alternative to more formulaic offerings. Who is this film for? If you're drawn to movies that mix dark humor with fantasy and horror, and you appreciate strong character work over CGI spectacle, this film is likely to resonate. Fans of Paul Rudd's understated humor and Jenna Ortega's dynamic performances will find plenty to enjoy. However, viewers expecting a straightforward horror or fantasy adventure might find the tonal shifts challenging or the pacing deliberate. The film's strengths lie in its writing and performances, but its genre blending might not satisfy purists on any one front. Overall, it's a solid worth the stream pick for those interested in something offbeat and thoughtfully crafted in the 2025 genre landscape. Potential weaknesses could stem from balancing so many tones. Some viewers might feel the comedy undercuts the horror or vice versa. The film's reliance on a fantastical premise, also demands a suspension of disbelief that may not work for everyone. But Schaffman's direction and the ensemble's performances largely compensate, delivering a story that intrigues and entertains without feeling overstuffed. The ending, while speculative, promises to tie together the film's thematic threads with a payoff that's as unsettling as it is darkly funny, maintaining the film's unique voice throughout. Death of a Unicorn reminds us that sometimes the most mythical stories come from the most unexpected collisions of family greed and the unknown. Schaffman's film uses its darkly comic fantasy to explore how fragile our sense of normalcy is when the extraordinary crashes into everyday life. If you are curious to see a genre film that defies easy labels and leans into the weirdness of its premise, this one deserves a watch. Thanks for joining me here on Cut to Real. If you want more sharp, no-nonsense film analysis, you know where to find us. Until next time, keep watching closely. Thanks for watching Cut to Real. I'll see you next time for another look beneath the surface of cinema's best.